Hi, my name is Neil Joshampule, and I'm bringing you this tour of a personal project I have started working on in order to review my ASPX.NET and C Sharp. So basically, I'm learning C Sharp because I usually used to program using VB. And I'm making a new database-driven website because I found that the best way to learn things is by actually using it and doing small projects with it. And that way you'll make your mistakes along the way, and there's nothing better than having an end product while you're learning something to show for it. So what I'm going to go through in this video is the tools I use while developing it, and anything I think might help you develop your own site. Okay, so let's get started. So at the moment, my site isn't complete. However, it does have enough to present key or core concepts. For example, I have completed the login screen as well as implemented sessions and for keeping track of when I'm logged in and when I'm not, and etc. So let me show you. So this is my login screen so far, right? I'm using Visual Studio's 2010. The backend is using C Sharp. My database that I'm connecting to is SQL Server 2008, and I guess that's all. Okay, so for now, let me show you how to add a database to your actual project. So my project's already open. This is the actual ASP source code for my master page, not my actual login page. However, I'll go to my login page. This is my C Sharp code, and this is my actual code, right? So this is the code for this screen, this login screen. I'm using Twitter Bootstrap as a sort of a framework to make developing the actual front end graphics a little bit more easier. So it has some cool little features, like for example, when I click on this box, it automatically starts to glow. Twitter Bootstrap also allows your application to be scalable. So when you shrink your screen, your application technically should or if you Twitter Bootstrap is used properly, your login screen or whatever web page you're making should scale, so you'll be able to view it on mobile phones, etc. Okay, so let's continue. So I'm over here, and I want to add a database to my web application. So I have a website. So what I would do is go to Server Explorer in Microsoft Visual Studios, right-click, add a connection, pick where my server is. So I have a local server, so I just put dot. I could also put local host here, or whatever you want to use, or even the IP. And then I would pick a database that I wanted to add. Oh wait, it's not just that, it's local dev. Then I would pick my database. So see, these are the databases on my own personal SQL Server. I pick Timesheet, and then I would test the connection. It succeeded, and then I would press OK. I've already gotten added, so I'm not going to re-add it. The next thing I would do after I added my database is I'll go to web.config, which is already in your application. If you had started a website application, I would add this. So basically you would have your connection string, and I would say add name. This is what I would refer to my connection string as, is equal to connection string over here. And then I would say it was from SQL Server, and I would end a connection string. That would allow me to access it from my actual program. So now in my code, whenever I want to access the database, I would make a new SQL connection. In order to use the SQL connection, I need to have included the library in C# system.data.sql client. Then I'll go new SQL connection, configuration manager dot connection string, and then I would refer to the connection string I entered in the web.config file dot connection string at the end. In order to use the configuration manager, you have to use the library system.configuration. And then in order to access session variables and such, I would need to include the system.web.session state. So let me show you the login page. So basically what I'm doing here is I have a SQL connection, and if they click the button, it's going to open a connection to my database. As you can see, I defined the connection up here, just like I talked about previously with the configuration manager and the connection string. Then I will define the query that I want to execute. I use a stored proc to determine whether the user name and password is correct or not. I wrap it in as a SQL command so I could send it to the actual database, and then I execute it with execute scalar. Basically, so I use user exists dot execute scalar, and I'm expecting a scalar result since I'm using execute scalar. So I convert it to string. I wrap it or cast it as an integer 32-bit, and I put it in I result. So based on my stored proc, if it returns a 1, that means the username and password was correct, and it's going to store the information into session variables. So http context.current.session, and then in the brackets is the name of the session variable, and then I'll set it to the text box username.text, and here I would set it to the password.text, and I would also store the session. Then I do some things for security. Here, this is another stored proc I set. I'm not going to tell you about that just in case you ever use this after it's done. I will be adding more security measures, but this was a little new trick. And then I execute that query in each session. And since I'm not expecting any results, I executed it using execute non-query. That means you're executing a query that won't return any results. And then I close my database connection because I don't want too many to be open at a time. So after that, since if my user exists stored proc returned a 1, it will send me back to the response. It'll redirect me to an internal page, and if not, it'll send a message to the user. It'll be like, this will set a label user message text box to tell them my account is either locked or the incorrect username or password was entered. And that is what is going on in the front end. When I'm working with the back end, let me show you a simple stored proc. I'm going to change this anyway, so I don't think it matters. So I'm going to show you my login proc. So basically, here's the login stored proc I made. So in my stored proc, I actually enter print statements. So this way, whenever I execute it on my own, I will be able to see what is happening in my actual stored proc. So let me give you an example. So whenever my stored proc starts running, it's going to say running proc underscore login. It's going to print out the names of the variables. I like using this notation because it tells me when it's the input, and I use the opposite brackets like over here when it's output. So you see it's the arrows going in the opposite direction. So using print statements in my actual code allows me to determine when a particular part of a stored proc is being run. Or if there's nested stored procs, it'll tell me which stored proc I'm in. So let me enter, that's my stored proc name, and I'm going to say my username is Neelan, and I'm going to enter a password of random. Okay, so I'm going to enter it, and I'm going to run it. So basically I got a 3. So my stored proc returns a 3 when that username doesn't exist, or the password doesn't exist. So in my messages box in SQL Server, I'll see my print statements. So I started running the proc with the login, and I had these variables set to these values. and it returned a 3 invalid account. So that way, I'm able to trace what's happening in my stored proc when I'm testing it and programming it. Okay, so now after my stored proc has been created, I don't know what's going to be run and when. So what I like to do is use SQL Profiler. So let's start a new trace. I'm going to connect to my database, the one that I'm using. So I'm using /local dev, and I will connect to it. And then I will set, I'll unselect these because it gets too complicated if you have all of them selected. And I only want to see when certain batch commands are executed. So I'm going to go to run. And so here's my trace. It started and it's running. So when I enter a wrong password here, blah, 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 I go login. It'll say incorrect username or password. Please choose carefully or you'll be locked out. So as you can see here, it's showing which stored proc is being run and which inputs. And this is the actual statement that was run on the computer. So if I was to take that and run it on my actual screen here, this is the exact same command that was run and passed to my login, as you can see from my front-end website. So by using SQL Server Profiler, I could track what happens and when. And since I ran it again in SQL Profiler, the trace file in Management Studios, the trace file picked up that query on the database and printed it out and said this happened. Okay, so now let me show you how I connect to a database from my front-end application. Oh, I already did. Okay, so now let me show you what happens when I log into this application. So I'm going to enter in a correct username and a correct password. And I'm going to log in. And it logs in, right? However, the catch of this is that only if I've logged in will I be allowed to access this page. So let me start up a new browser, and each browser is going to have a different session. Naturally, sessions are server-side connections, so they're stored on the server. So if I was to go to this page directly without being logged in, I'm using Firefox right now, it wouldn't let me get there. See, so it redirected me to the login screen rather than to the timesheet screen. So this tab menu is a feature of Twitter Bootstrap. It makes things so much easier development and looks really nice. Of course, this is not the best looking yet because I haven't really used it. I was just using elements from Twitter Bootstrap. So it seems to speed up development and make things looking pretty a lot faster. I use JavaScript to limit the types of input that could be entered in a text box, so I can't enter any letters. I could only enter numbers here. So as you can see, I could only enter numbers. Nothing else has been implemented, but that is basically an overview of the timesheet system so far. And I think I've gone over everything that major components. I used response.redirect to redirect me to a different different screen. I check to see whether the session variables are set in order to determine whether you could log in or not. If they are set, I use another function over here. No, over in my master page. So I'll use this. I'll execute another query to verify the session, and only if the session is active and it passes certain criteria will it allow you through. Otherwise, if it doesn't pass the criteria, it's going to redirect you to the login screen, and you won't be able to use the program either because it won't work without the proper session and password and username. So I guess that is it for a tour of my application that is in development so far. So as I showed you how you could use SQL Server to keep a record of the actual stored processes that are executed, as well as the inputs that cause certain problems. So let me give you another, let me explain in further detail. So if there is an erroring stored proc while your website isn't working, you could basically recreate that error, because you can go to Management Studios, run it here, and then this is the same actual stored proc that was executed while I was running. I'll be able to execute it. I got a 0 back, and I'll also, if it had print statements within it with these inputs, it would print it out for me, so I'd be able to get more details. Then I would be able to ingest SQL Profiler, and then I would be able to drill down on what the source of the error is. Oh yeah, there's another thing I wanted to show you. With the master pages and any of your actual pages, if you want to be able to, there's a debugging mode that you use in ASP.NET. So basically, in order to get more detailed responses from your Visual Studios, you would have to go into the page and set in your definition, you'd have to set debug equal to true, and then it'll give you detailed information. If you don't have debug equal to true in your ASPX file, it won't give you any more information. Then it'll be very vague. It'll tell you there's a problem, but it won't tell you why. So that way you won't be able to solve or drill down to the source of the problem. So it's kind of annoying sometimes, but you could do that. You could either do it up here, or you could do it in your web.config file, which is actually very powerful. But if you do it to your web.config file, it'll apply the settings to your entire website rather than just a single page. And that is all from my web application for now. Oh no, actually I got another thing I wanted to show you. So whenever error happens on the front end, I use a tool. You could either use Firebug, which is a nice debugging thing. I use Chrome Developer Tools, or I mean Internet Explorer Developer Tools. So basically, by right-clicking and clicking Inspect Elements, I'll get this this screen, and it basically is all the HTML on the screen. It'll allow me to edit particular elements on the screen if I wanted to. So, for example, I have Timesheet 4. I could change its name, Timesheets. I click away, so as you can see, it reflected the changes on the actual website. It's not permanent, however, it is great for testing out changes and seeing how they will look in your browser. If there's a network error or I'm passing objects back and forth, I could just go to network and I'll see the network traffic whenever my page loads. So as you can see, these are all the pages that passed back and forth, the time it took to pass them back and forth. If I'm looking for a particular element on my website, I could use this. So for example, I want to find out where I'm using, let's say for example, I'm using JavaScript and I want to find a div tag. Let's see my elements. I have a div tag called shadow measurement. So I want to see if that's on my page. I could just do this, measure it, and it'll show me whether there's anything in that div tag or whether it found it. It didn't find it in this case, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. Or you could just read up on it. And you could also enter, it'll also send you, if you enter in your JavaScript console.log commands, you'll be able to track your JavaScript files and send back feedback that is useful. Network traffic will tell you what is passed back and forth. So especially if you're using JSON calls or any other calls, you'll be able to see what's passed back in response to certain network traffic sends. What else? Yeah, it has many more features, and based on what you use, it becomes even more useful, right? I'm browsing through a lot of the information that's used on the site, like the glyphicons, which are icons that come with Twitter Bootstrap, certain JavaScript functions that are used. This is what I use to limit my my character inputs to only be character numbers, not characters. And that is all. I hope you enjoyed this tour of this program I'm in working on, and I hope it has been informative as to how I develop and the tools I use when developing. Thank you. Bye.